Can I ask you a little bit about how diving into it just a little bit more, because I read your release, some of the ways in which a little bit more mechanically that you would also have the public servants be, say, showing like, here's where I was meeting, or here's where I was working, here's what I was doing this day, like to prove to the public, show and prove to the public that they are working towards those purposes, that they are having the meetings and being at the, scoping out the locales or doing whatever the work is required of them.
Yeah.
How you would do that?
So this notion of recognize it's got to be a systems approach. Sorry to get nerdy, but it's a systems approach. A lot of money is being spent in these silos. This is based on best practices elsewhere. This is based on my own experience, the experience of others that have more expertise than I do. But it's also based, and the clients that find it impossible to make their way into the system or stay in the system, it's just too hard. But it also comes from the folks that are out in the field, that are out on the streets, that are trying to make those contacts, the folks that are in the free and low-cost medical and mental health providers. They feel chewed up, demoralized. Their patients aren't getting the kind of sustained and stable kind of outreach from the system. So they want the system to improve as much as anyone, because right now they help people and there's a moment of hopeful, clarity or something, but then they're right back.
I think a lot of voters are also taxpayers, and one of the things we hear a lot in our course of going out and doing coverage on these issues that you're running to address would say, we're spending the money, we're paying the taxes, but we're not seeing results.
Yeah. Well, I totally understand when people vote to raise their own taxes, when other proceeds come in from the federal government or state government, and it's a big increase in spending, and and folks aren't seeing the commensurate improvements. I totally get that. And they don't need to know the policies and machinations and protocols. They just intuitively know by seeing that, and they're right. It's our job to be the nerds, to be the sort of policy engineers, to set aside our egos and use this money, this new money, hard-earned tax dollars, in a way that's going to produce results. And define success by how the system's working. Not one program, not one pet project, not even one great larger program. If it's not also connected up with other programs, so we're giving the kinds of services to help people get to a better place, failure is incredibly expensive. It's also deadly. And I come from a background in growing up in Newport, Oregon, in my family. I saw firsthand what these kinds of issues can do to smart, hardworking people. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
I can see that. Is this the area of the city that you would be most focused on, that this would be your turf, so to speak, as for Chair 2? Would this be your area?
So District 2 is just across the freeway. So it's 148th to the tip of the peninsula, St. John's. And it's I-85, the ditch, which is 1 block away. So we're just outside my district, to the Columbia River. It's a big district. It is a district that has seen a lot of impact by homelessness, by the lack of affordable housing that can cause homelessness, from a 3 to 5 year waiting list to get into rental housing. The waiting list for mental health and addiction services is dangerously too long. and just this patchwork of services that are clearly collectively failing to take care of people, and in doing so, improve the entire community.
I wanted to ask that question because this is still so new that even I'm not really quite familiar with literally the pieces of land that we're speaking of now that this is kind of...
And I hear it all the time. You are not alone. I have to explain to people what a Multnomah County is, much less no conceptualization of which of the 4 county commissioner districts they live in. And that's part of the problem here, and you'll see in my initial set of proposals is part of why I think the county lacks focus, lacks urgency, lacks accountability, is it lacks visibility. And it certainly lacks transparency. Most of the large counties up and down the West Coast, for example, we want our county like we want our city to be making decisions based on facts. We want them to be making decisions based on lived experience, based on experts, based on the numbers, the measurements that are being produced. And one way to make sure that fair and good decisions are made is for those that are lobbying on behalf of a special interest, be required to report that they're a lobbyist, when that lobbyist occurs, and on what issue was discussed. So up and down the West Coast, most large counties like Multnomah County have a requirement that there is lobbying registration and lobbying reporting. Not Multnomah County. Most of the large cities up and down the West Coast want to make sure that the folks that are working for them, the staff, especially the leadership staff, that they are focused at the issue of hand. They don't want even the perception that they might be making decisions now looking to some other position in the future. And so most counties have a prohibition on the revolving door where county staff have to wait a year or 2 before they can come back and lobby the county. This county doesn't have that. Now, this is, I have to admit, a pet peeve of mine. I'm the one that introduced, after almost 12 years working in City Hall and seeing it not having a lobbying registration and reporting, and seeing how much of it was going on. And one of the first things I did when I went from working for Vera Katz as a staff to city commissioners, I introduced lobbying, registration, and reporting and other transparency tools for the public to feel assured that decisions are being made based on the facts, not on personal or professional relationships. And this lack of visibility, this lack of transparency is really important along with the other proposals that I'm making. They have to go hand in hand. The county, like the city, has hundreds of contractors. And like the city, we have to be very careful how those relationships are managed between staff, contractors. But you can't do that if there isn't rules in place that require it. That's a top priority to help fix the other issues that we face.
I kind of have to ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to ask this question.
I know.
You know
I know what the
coming.
question.
People are going to say, when we're talking about relationships and we're talking about working across the table and working across these lines.
Yeah.
When you worked for the mayor's office and you left the mayor's office, the terms over which you left, there were allegations that you were not getting along with people that you were working with in the office. Some people might pose the question like, well, how can we trust him to be the guy who's going to build these relationships and work and bring these people together when he's been accused of not being able to work that way before?
So I don't wake up in the morning wanting to make people angry at me or frustrated. But I do wake up in the morning feeling very responsible in my role as a public servant. And I work with people, and we might disagree. And I still try to meet folks if I'm convinced what they're suggesting makes sense, if they can show me or just convince me that something makes sense. But at a certain point, my job, my sacred job, is to deliver improvements, constant improvements for Portlanders, folks that reside in Multnomah County. And at some point, I have to call it and move on. And sometimes that works out well, and people part agreeing to disagree, and sometimes it doesn't. But I try to work well with everybody.
I think a follow-up question people would want me to ask is, did you take anything other than that away from that? Is there something, insight that you gained, something that you learned that you're from that experience one way or the other that is going to inform you?
Well, the other part of this is the public didn't get the full story. And the mayor's office withheld an email that you and the news media asked for and didn't get. It was my attorney that asked for additional documents that found an email, the mayor signing off in his own name to my resignation for health issues. So I always am working to improve. I am always trying to figure out how I can be a better staffer, a better leader. Of course, all those things. But this particular case is, can head towards the legal arena. So I don't want to say very much more, but the public expects, fair treatment, but they also expect, in the end, to move forward with improvements. And these issues that I was working on were very controversial, and people had very strong opinions about it. I respect those. I don't get it right every time, but how it was handled in the mayor's office, there's a lot more to the story, like withholding an email, not just to me, but to you and the media, So there'll be more on that.